Awesome. And welcome to the Winter Garden Yoga podcast. My name is Brian. I'm the co-owner and the co-director of Winter Garden Yoga. And I'm really very excited to have as our guest today a mentor of mine since I was 35 years old. So that's 15 years. I've been following Steve's advice directly and indirectly for a long time. I've been applying his principles to the way I teach yoga, to the way I teach strength training, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to take too much away from our conversation, but Steve, if you'll take a second and just kind of tell folks who you are, where you've been, where you're headed, that'd be great.
Brian, thanks for having me on the show. I've been in the fitness industry since 1970. That's before the fitness industry actually existed. I was a health and physical education major in Westchester State College at the time. And I knew from the age of 12 I wanted to be a physical educator. And later got my degree and taught in the public school system, coached wrestling. And then quickly found out that, teaching kids isn't really all that great. And I got into the budding health industry. It was just in its infancy at the time. I had a lot of different things that I did, while I was finding myself within the fitness industry. But I've been a full-time professional in the fitness industry, I guess, since late 70s, and worked every kind of capacity you can think of within that time. And I guess I've always been one other thing, besides I wore another hat. I also was always interested in martial arts. And I was one of the first people in the U.S. to get a black belt from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu family. They're the people that created the UFC that some people might be familiar with. Mm-hmm. So I was very lucky to be on the ground floor of a lot of different movements in the country. So I guess for people that don't know me, just consider me a fitness educator and someone who's also a perpetual student, always learning.
For sure. And definitely someone who walks the walk and talks the talk. Because I remember distinctly, I was about 35 years old, and Steve and I were talking a little bit before we started recording this. We were talking about extremes. So when I was 35 years old, I was on the extreme end of yoga. I was, really very flexible. I was practicing handstands a lot and whatnot, and I was busted up. And then I saw this ad. I think it was your very first VHS tape, Cruel and Unusual Kettlebell. Do you remember that? Your very first tape?
Yeah, I made that kind of on a whim. Pavel Zetsolian, who sort of reintroduced the kettlebell to America,
right,
via Russia, had said, "Hey, you got to get a videotape out." So I had been doing some kind of bizarre exercises for a while. Bizarre by some standards, by other standards, pretty mainstream. At any rate, I made that video. It was just shot it on a tripod VHS camera in my wrestling room. I had a jiu-jitsu school in Center City, Philadelphia. It was the very first one on the East Coast. So I just threw up the camera up and just did my thing, man.
Well, it worked, because that video changed my life, because I thought to myself, well, this guy, were you 50 years old at the time?
I was doggone close. I had to have been very close to 50 at that time, yes.
Because I was thinking, what is this guy doing at 50 that he's doing bodyweight stuff, he's doing kettlebell stuff. He doesn't seem to be all busted up. Versus me, I'm 35, I'm doing yoga that's supposed to be helping me, but my shoulders are wrecked, my low back is killing me. And that's what kind of got me out of the yoga box, to kind of look at the body as a physical thing and to practice things under the rules of biomechanics and kinesiology. Does that make sense?
It does. But since that time, even I have changed my
Sure.
opinion quite a bit. I'm no longer an advocate of kettlebells at all anymore. As a matter of fact, I would tell most people don't do that. Prior to that, I had done a lot of body weight and even machine training.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certain kettlebell exercises that can really damage your body. So you got to be very careful. They can be done safely, but once again, most people get very extremist about it. And it all becomes about weight and excessive number of repetitions. And just like yoga can be either a friend or an enemy,
Mm-hmm.
kettlebells can be the same way. So I've seen a lot of people damage themselves. So you got to be very careful with the way you do any of these type of exercises. Exercise can be really fantastic if done properly and with good form, but it can destroy your body if you're not careful.
For sure.
Basically, in my philosophy, if you're getting hurt doing your exercise routine, you're doing something wrong. Exercise should prevent injuries, not cause. So if you are getting overuse injuries or damage, well, then obviously you got to take a hard look at what you're doing. And that's what I did. I took a very hard look at like, well, what is it that I'm really promoting here? And why am I suffering some problems with shoulders and elbows and such? And so I took a long, hard look and pretty much changed my philosophy. Part of this course, Brian, comes with the aging process too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's certain things that it doesn't matter how well you take care of your body. You know, it is eventually going to die. Like my grandfather said, "No one gets out of here alive, Steve."
Right.
So you know, you do have to you do have a sliding scale. I'm not one of these people that you know goes around, oh, I'm too old to do this or that. You know, you just find new things to do, or things that you can do as your body begins to break down as you begin to age. You can certainly slow it down to a crawl, and you know, I still get in the mat, I still roll in jiu-jitsu. For those that don't know, when I say rolling, it means like wrestling, sparring.
Right.
You know, sort of. So I can still do that with the young guys, but I just got to be really smart about the way I do it. So I think as a man and woman ages, you got to start to scale things down and start to become a little bit more realistic about what it is you're doing, and realize that you're not in that building phase anymore. You only have a very small window for that building phase where you're going to build any kind of strength or muscularity.
Mm-hmm.
And that window closes just about 40, mid-40s. Physical improvements at that point are pretty much done, unless you start at that age. You could start even in your 80s and still make great progress. But people that have been training, let's say 5-6 years, pretty much what you see is what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of, it could either be liberating or it can be frustrating. You know, so for me, I'm a classic ectomorph. There's nothing outside of steroids that would help put mass onto my frame.
And you'd be shocked at how little steroids would even help.
Right.
Believe it or not. That they would help, but pretty minimally, and the risk to benefit ratio just wouldn't be worth it.
So at first it was frustrating because I would do whatever it is you're supposed to do, hard gainer workouts, et cetera, and I could just never put significant mass on my frame. But then it became liberating because I realized this is what I got to work with. So let me focus on strengths and abilities versus becoming frustrated with what I can't do. Does that make sense?
Exactly. It's kind of a form of acceptance. Mm-hmm. And the only reason any of us get frustrated in the beginning is because we have unrealistic expectations about what exercise can or cannot do for us. Mm-hmm. Now, with the women out there, they don't particularly care about getting big and muscular. I mean, some girls do, but most don't. Most girls worry about becoming too muscular. They've seen some of the female bodybuilders and fitness models, and many of these fitness models and so forth, physique competitors are taking steroids, by the way, for the ladies out there. You know, they're cheating. I've worked with some top female fitness competitors, bikini models, and a lot of these girls are taking performance enhancing drugs and such. It's pretty well known. But outside of that, most guys do want to put on some size and strength. But we've been given a bill of goods. The human body does not have an unlimited potential for gaining mass and size. Most people are never going to get particularly big and muscular. And the bodybuilding magazines and the online stuff would have you believe that that's not the case, that everyone can get big and strong and have this unlimited potential. And that's basically just to sell worthless supplements and to sell next month's issue of the magazine or the online magazine or whatever. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there's a small percentage of the population that can get pretty big and pretty strong, pretty muscular. And unfortunately, they're the people that everyone flocks to for information. But these guys have no clue on how they got the way they did. They're genetic superiors, genetic wonders, and things that would work for them aren't going to work for like 90% of most people out there.
Right.
But they're the ones that we go to for advice. The guy with the biggest arms and the biggest chest gets to be the trainer, that everyone flocks to. And everyone assumes because the guy's big and strong that he knows what he's doing. In truth, they'd actually be better off going to someone like yourself that struggled to put on even just a few pounds of muscle, or someone like myself. So I think what happens, the unrealistic expectations set people up for failure, basically. Mm-hmm. You start trying to follow programs of people with phenomenal recovery and phenomenal genetics, and it just ends up being an exercise in frustration, or even worse, you end up getting sick or injured or whatever. Mm-hmm. I've seen it over and over in my fitness career.
Well, let's take a second and if we can, let's draw upon that, if you don't mind, drawing upon your 50 years of experience and just kind of a hypothetical thing. If the Steve Maxwell from 15 years ago would listen to the current Steve Maxwell, what are 3 things you would tell yourself? What are 3 things you would tell me? I'm 50. What are 3 things I should be thinking about as I work my way to being 65? What are 3 things that everyone should consider if they want to train for a lifetime?
The amount of weight is not important unless you're a weightlifter. If you're competing in a weightlifting sport, then the amount of weight is not important. The number of repetitions is not important. It's the way you do those reps and the way you lift the weight that's the single most important thing. Now, we know you can get good results with really terrible form. You see huge guys just slinging the weights around, mm-hmm. or using horrible technique, and they're huge and they're strong and muscular. So we know that you can use bad form and still get good results, but it's not sustainable. And many of those guys, for every YouTube wonder, there's like 1,000 guys out there with elbows and shoulders and back that are completely destroyed, mm-hmm. or guys that follow the exact same program that crashed and burned. So we know that the amount of weight. We always heard that heavy weight, low reps for strength, medium reps, medium weight for hypertrophy or muscle size, and lighter weight, high reps for endurance. Well, current research shows that it doesn't matter. You get strong no matter what. You can use as little as 30% of your single rep max, right up to like 80 or 90%, and still get great results. So in my way of thinking, rather than subject your joints to excessively heavy loads when it doesn't really matter, why not use moderate to lighter loads and use perfect form so that you can actually make a lightweight feel heavier by manipulating it, by moving slowly with high tension through good range of motion and not doing anything that's going to damage or harm yourself. We also know that repetitions themselves don't really matter. It's the time under load. In other words, how long each set takes. And the way most people do their exercises, they lift the weight in 1 second and drop it. I mean, they could do like 20 reps literally in 40 seconds. I'm a big advocate of moving slowly with high tension and not subjecting my joints to excessive forces. Another thing I tell myself is stop swinging weights around and stop throwing weights around. Don't use explosivity. This idea that you can do exercises in an explosive manner or a fast, rapid manner and selectively work fast twitch muscle fibers, that's just simply not true. There's nothing in science to support that. Your box jumps, your power cleans, your snatches, there's no evidence whatsoever that you were working fast twitch muscle fiber. You're working slow twitch muscle fiber. And you eventually recruit fast twitch muscle fiber if you produce enough fatigue. So this idea that if you move fast, you'll be fast, that's not true. If you want to be fast in a sport, let's say like dunking a basketball or serving a tennis serve in an explosive manner or improve your golf swing, you still lift your weights and do your exercises slow, under tension, and then you practice the skill of your sport as close to game or match conditions as possible. And in that way, you can improve yourself as much as you're going to be able to improve. But swinging weighted clubs around or, like club bells or whatever, heaving weights around, it's not going to make you more explosive. You're not using fast twitch muscle fibers. That's one of the biggest myths out there.
Okay.
This whole idea of battling ropes and things like that. You're just making yourself tired for no good reason. And you're subjecting yourself to a lot of high force in your wrists and your elbows and your shoulders. That's something I would tell myself.
Okay, so
it's not necessary to do this stuff. And not only is it not necessary, it's potentially damaging to your body.
Okay, so which is all excellent to hear, by the way. So the first thing is it doesn't matter if you're using body weight, dumbbells, or whatever. It's not so much the weight in the repetitions. It's just to get a strength response from the muscles. Is that correct?
Well, the what is important. So we know that weight isn't important,
okay,
and the amount of repetitions aren't important. What is important? Perfect form, using really good technique, slow, high tension, total control. There's a movement on either end. When you lift a weight, it's called the positive rep or concentric. When you lower the weight, it's eccentric or negative. And then you have holding strength or isometric strength. Well, as you change direction, let's say from a positive to the negative, there's a moment called a turnaround where you change direction. That should be very controlled. Most people don't pay attention to that part of the rep. Everything's kind of choppy and jerky. Sometimes the swinging and momentum, because they're under the mistaken notion that the goal is to see how much weight they can lift or how many reps they can do. That's not the goal. The goal is to produce a deep level muscle fatigue. So what's really important is the intensity of effort, how effortful the exercise is. It needs to be very, very effortful. So you want to make the exercise as hard as possible. So anything that makes the exercise easier, you need to eliminate. And anything that makes the exercise harder, you want to incorporate. I'm going to give an example. Let's take a bodyweight squat, for example. Most people, when they do squats, they'll squat maybe to the halfway down point and then stand up and lock out their knees, right? And that's the top part of a squat. And it's pretty easy. Even an average person could probably, put a heavy weight on their back. Even smaller people, maybe even over 200 pounds, and certainly do the top part of a barbell squat. But the top part of the squat is extremely easy because of leverage factors. What if we were starting at the bottom, like a yoga prayer squat, and create tension and very slowly rise up just a little bit past the halfway point? where the top of your thighs rise just above the parallel point, where maybe you're 2/3 of the way up, and then stop there and slowly reverse direction and slowly lower back down to a prayer squat, but not relax at the bottom. Keep tension and do our squats that way. I've taken guys that can squat 500 pounds and they couldn't even do 6 reps of that squat I just described.
Interesting.
Guys that could handle 500-pound body weight or barbell squat when given a body weight squat where they were just working the bottom 2/3, their thighs just completely gave out. So your body doesn't really know, weight or reps or anything. All it knows is how hard it worked. So that body weight squat would be just as effortful as a heavier squat done in the top ranges of the movement. In other words, if I'm working with a heavy weight in the easy range of the squat movement, the top third, I'm not going to really get the same kind of results as I would by moving a little bit more effortfully and working in that bottom 2/3. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it. Not that I wouldn't get results. You're going to get results no matter what you do if it's hard enough. But my point is, I don't need to subject my spine to the shearing forces of the barbell or the compression on my spine and my shoulders of having a heavy weight across my back. I don't need to do that. I can still work my butt and my thighs extremely hard just using my body weight, by manipulating the range of motion and by putting myself in a biomechanically disadvantageous position. In other words, doing the hard part of the movement. I don't need to be stronger at the top part of the movement. It's already strong enough. Where I need to be strong is that mid-range and that lower range. Most people in my seminars can't even squat with the body weight anyway. They cannot go down into a deep butt to the floor squat and keep their heels in the floor without coming up on their toes or excessively bending forward. They've just lost all their mobility. So this type of training I'm talking about combines the best elements of mobility and strength and endurance together. And it's very effortful and it's very safe. And anyone that would get in the mat with me would not say I'm not strong.
Gotcha.
I could no longer demonstrate a heavy barbell squat because there are strength is very specific. So if you want to lift heavy, you got to practice heavy.
Right.
But just because you don't lift heavy, and maybe you can't demonstrate a big bench or deadlift or a squat, doesn't mean you're weak either. It's just different expressions. And lifting a heavy weight is a specific skill, but it's not necessary to do that to be strong. Some of the strongest guys I've ever faced on the jiu-jitsu mat or the wrestling mat don't even lift weights at all. They couldn't demonstrate a big, heavy lift because they don't have the skills, the strength skills necessary for lifting that heavy weight. But my God, when they do other things like wrestling or jiu-jitsu or whatever, they feel ridiculously strong.
So one thing that I'm hearing, a recurring theme is kind of like two things. One is risk to benefit ratio.
That's correct.
And then the other is specificity. So in other words, so will you talk a little bit about those two things? Like what does risk to benefit ratio mean and the difference between training specifically for something versus general training or general exercise?
Sure. A risk to benefit ratio is basically what it says. If you have, let's say, 2 exercises, and one is potentially dangerous to some part of your body, and the other is not, and they both produce pretty much about the same results, we'll go with the safer exercise. Go with the safer exercise. For example, I just mentioned heavy barbell squats versus just a bodyweight squat, or even a goblet squat with a kettlebell or dumbbell. Both are going to give good results. Both are very effortful. But one is much safer, and you're still going to get about as strong as you genetically are capable of getting, doing either one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, down the road is not going to really make that much of a difference. What I found is within about 5 years, 6 years, all programs pretty much lead you to whatever your genetic potential is. It doesn't matter. Kettlebells, barbells, dumbbells, bodyweight, gymnastics training, in the hood training. I suppose even like some of the more strenuous yoga type training, you're going to be pretty much wherever you're going to be within about 5 years. What you see is what you get, and you're going to reach pretty close to your genetic potential. So if 2 exercise programs, right, are going to produce pretty much the same results within about 5 or 6 years, or several different systems, but one takes 3 hours to do, and one takes like 1 hour to do. Well, take the shorter one.
Right.
Yeah. If several exercise systems are going to produce about the same level of strength and hypertrophy, well, do the one that's safest. Take the one that's safest. I like to use the job analogy. If you had 2 jobs available, right, and one requires 70 hours a week in the office and pays you a certain amount of salary, and the other one requires 30 hours a week to produce, the same exact amount of pay, well, of course you're going to take the 30-hour work week as opposed to the 70-hour work week.
Right.
The payoff is going to be the same. The only people that this would be an exception for would be people that just love to be in the gym. That they're social butterflies, and that's their social outlet. Some people just like to just hang out, look in the mirror, look at the girls in the treadmill, talk to their buddies, camp out in the bench press, and read the paper in between sets. I've known guys like that. Okay, I get it. You like to be in the gym. Go for it. Me personally, I always lifted to be better at other things. I wanted to be a stronger, more resilient body. I was always involved with martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu actually, and now this Russian Sistema. So for me, the training was just a means to an end. I wanted to make my joints a little bit more resistant to injury. I wanted to have strength so that I could perform better in my chosen task. Because, as you know, a stronger muscle is a more efficient muscle. So you can do everything from climbing stairs to running to, picking up your grandkids more efficiently. Mm-hmm. Now, back to your other question. That was kind of long-winded. Sorry.
That's great. No, it's good.
But the other question was specificity. Well, everything's pretty specific. Being good at one type of activity won't make you better at something else. One sport won't make you better at another sport. So let's take, for example, powerlifting. It's a sport. You squat, you bench, and you deadlift. And powerlifters are enormously strong. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that strength transfers. I've seen guys that are very good at deadlifting but have trouble flipping a tire, like they do in the strongman competitions, because you have to bend way down to get up underneath that tire. I had a situation in my gym where I had 2 powerlifters, 2 fairly well-known strength guys, come in. Both could deadlift over 500 pounds. And I don't believe I could have – I think my deadlift at that time was about 335, 340 pounds, which was actually double my body weight, so it's not bad. But these guys were deadlifting well over 500 pounds. Yet I took a 200-pound sandbag, and I was able to shoulder it. I could lift it up and put it on my shoulder. I also had a steel wrecking ball, big steel round, looked like a big old marble. And I was able to, it was 189 pounds exactly. And I could lift it up and put it on my left shoulder, roll it around my neck to my right shoulder, and then put it back down on the floor. Neither one of these gentlemen could get my sandbag up past their waist. Neither of them could get the steel ball up on their shoulder. Now, does that mean they were weaker? No. They didn't have the specific skills of lifting the sandbag or lifting the steel wrecking ball. But they were certainly strong by powerlifting standards. I couldn't even get close to deadlifting what they could. So who was stronger, me or them? You see, it's like apples and oranges. It doesn't matter. Who's stronger, a guy that can rip a deck of playing cards in half or a guy that can hang by one hand for a minute? Who's stronger?
Right.
You see, there's no ways to compare. So strength can be pretty specific. But then you mentioned something called general strength. General strength is taking fairly non-specific exercises. And I like to follow the rules of the 5 pillars. A pushing and pulling horizontally, and a pushing and pulling vertically. A vertical push would be like an overhead press or a handstand press. You mentioned handstands, doing handstand push-ups. A vertical pull would be a pull-up or a chin-up. A horizontal pull would be like a bent over barbell row or a dumbbell row, or it could be a body weight row in a TRX. And a push-up would be a horizontal press or a bench press or something along those lines. Or even a parallel bar dip where you're leaning forward is basically a horizontal push. So that would cover the upper body, right? Push, pull, push, pull. Then a squat, some form of squat, and a lunge is basically a variation of a squat, and some type of hinging movement, which would be your deadlift, or people familiar with kettlebells, it's a kettlebell swing. It's called a hinge. And then you have rotational movements of the core, and then you have like ancillary movements, like what we call simple movements. I hate to use the word isolation because it's impossible to isolate. A simple movement would be standing up on your toes, like a standing calf raise, or a bicep curl, or a dumbbell lateral raise. These are simple movements, and there's certainly a place for those. And that's how I build my training, around the 5 pillars movement and around simple exercises. Those are general exercises, because they don't take a lot of skill. And you'll find that the more skill a movement takes, the less carryover value it has into other activities. For example, an Olympic barbell snatch is an amazing thing to watch. Olympic lifters are incredible athletes. They are bundles of fast twitch muscle fiber. Back in the 80s, they tested all the different groups of athletes. I forget the study. I remember reading it. Anyway, it ended up that Olympic lifters had one of the highest vertical jumps. They actually were able to out-jump volleyball players, basketball players, and even some track and field athletes. They just had this incredible jump. And it would be kind of logical to suppose that, well, if Olympic lifters have the best vertical jump, if I do Olympic lifting, I too will improve my ability to jump, and I'll improve my explosivity.
Right.
But that's false logic. What they don't understand is survivor bias and selection bias. People that are going to be successful at Olympic lifting already have the attributes. They already are born with fast twitch muscle fiber. Right. Therefore, they're successful with Olympic lifting. The Olympic lifting didn't make them more explosive. The explosive guy was successful in Olympic lifting. And then you have survivor bias. The guys that you see in the Olympics, or even guys that are, like local, state, or, national champions, they were the ones that survived the training. You don't see all the guys that broke their shoulders or dislocated the shoulder, missing a snatch, or damaging their spine. You don't see those guys. You only see the successful ones.
Right.
So it's false logic to assume that if you Olympic lift, you're going to make yourself more explosive. So that's why I say an Olympic snatch is an amazing thing. It's a tremendous feat of athleticism. But it has very little transfer into anything else. Being really good at Olympic snatch, it certainly makes you stronger, but there's much better and safer ways to get strong in your hips and your thighs and your spine without putting all that forces on your joints. There's much safer ways to do it with higher transfer. And I guess the logic would be like this. Imagine you're a Martian and you first time visiting Earth, and you beam down into a NBA basketball game. And you're sitting there observing these guys out there in the floor, and these are all huge, tall people. you know? They're huge, giants, dribbling that basketball out there. And then you look at the audience, and everyone's kind of short and much smaller. You can make the assumption that, well, by playing that game basketball and dribbling that ball, it makes you tall.
Right.
Not realizing that tall people, are drawn to the sport because they have the physical attributes to be successful at the sport. But just because you play the sport doesn't mean that you're going to develop the same attributes. Another one, gymnastics. Gymnasts have fabulous bodies. They're some of the strongest pound-for-pound athletes ever. They're really amazing. They can do truly amazing stuff. Even non-Olympic stuff, like just like, the street style workouts where guys are doing human flags and doing front levers and back levers and all this really cool stuff, muscle ups, iron cross in the rings, this type of thing. You would think that, well, these things will make me look like a gymnast. But if you don't have the attribute of the gymnast, you're never going to be successful. If you're a tall, thin, wiry guy, man, you could do all the gymnastics training in the world, and it's not going to make you look more muscular if you're a tall, lanky kind of guy. And there's a good chance that you're going to damage your elbows and your shoulders, because the people that do really good at that type of stuff, they have short lever arms, they have long muscle bellies, their tendon insertions are just placed just the right way. The proportion of their legs to the upper body is just so. So your success is pretty much based on what attributes you have going in. So a younger version of myself, I would have been a little bit more sensitive. What are my attributes? And I would have worked towards those and started trying to develop attributes that I don't have or don't have the potential for, and just making myself frustrated and or even damaging myself trying to do stuff that I'm just not cut out for. You understand?
Oh, absolutely.
But I don't wish to make people feel completely limited. My father's a perfect example. Here's a guy that outlived all his brothers and sisters by many, many years. Every one of his brothers and sisters, he had 8 brothers and sisters. They all died before they reached their 72nd birthday. One brother died at 69. His own father died of a massive heart attack when he was in his late 50s. His mother died at 72. And everyone in his family was pretty much dead. So if anyone sort of was dealt a raw deal in the gene pool, it was my father. But yet, he was the only one not to be overweight. He ate very light. He was always a very light eater. Never snacked, just 3 square meals a day. Nothing fancy, but, he ate plenty of raw fruits and vegetables. He walked and he ran almost every day, and he lifted weights a couple times a week. And he passed away a few months ago at 95 years old. So there you go. Here's a guy that maximized his genetic potential for longevity by taking the moderate route and taking care of himself. Because had he gone like the typical American, being sedentary and so forth, he probably would have fared very much like his mother and his father and his brothers and sisters. But he didn't. So you don't have to be necessarily a slave to your genetics, even if you have been dealt a bad hand genetics-wise. You can still suppress this, the expression of certain genes and live a pretty healthy life.
Got you. First, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. And the second,
95, it was time, man. It was time, Well, besides, I believe very strongly that death is not the end.
Oh, so, yeah.
This earth plane is definitely pretty low on the consciousness scale. So
that's a whole.
He's in a much better place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole other podcast. So a couple of things that I heard while we were speaking and just kind of reminded me of what we were talking about earlier. So about a minute ago, you said you're trying not to put too many limitations on what people do for exercise or training. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's either frustrating or it's liberating. So
Yes.
for me, in the context of yoga, you know, there were always these very, very vigorous back bends. And the back bends, they just killed me. Like, they just hurt my low back to no end. And it could be, now I understand, it could have just been leverages on my spine, my shoulders, etc. But when I figured out that I couldn't do these back bends, I was happy. I was like, I'll never have to do those stupid back bends again, because I could do like a half bridge or some other something that was safer, where I was still getting about 80% of the benefit without worrying about destroying my shoulders. So I hope that as people are listening to this, that instead of finding frustration, they find liberation. Maybe they'll never do a barbell snatch. That could be liberating. It could be a good thing, because there are other safer things you can do that move you forward instead of getting stuck on a specific exercise program. Does that make sense?
And you have to ask yourself, why do I want to do it in the first place?
Yeah.
Because it's cool. It looks cool.
Correct.
You know, all my buddies are going to love me.
Right.
You know, I mean, you have to ask yourself, why do I want to do it? What's the supposed benefit? Are the risk of doing it worth it?
Right.
You know, worth the pain and injury. And you're not the only one to call foul on the back bends. Shandor Ramite, who is created Shadow Yoga, he's like the yoga teacher's teacher. A lot of people go to him for guidance. He's been around forever. He worked with Iyengar in India for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And Shandor was saying, yeah, man, there's backbending postures. As you're familiar with the different doshas, the different constitutional tests, mm-hmm. he claimed they built excessive heat. And a lot of people, especially pitters, end up just burning themselves up with too much heat from the excessive back-bending postures. And in fact, I heard him say in one of his seminars, there's 1,000 times more enlightenment and a good seated forward bend than all the back-bending postures in the world. So you're not the only yogi to discover that back-bending postures are good for some, but for many they're not.
Correct.
And, being flexi-bendy is not necessarily healthy either. My most frequently injured athletes in my competition jiu-jitsu team, for those that don't know, jiu-jitsu is like judo or wrestling. You wrestle with jackets. You throw each other. You take each other down. You apply submission holds and strangles. It's pretty much an extremist sport. And it's also a form of self-defense. Mm-hmm. And but there's also competitions where you compete, where you don't strike each other. You just what we call grappling. Anyway, I had a competition team for years, and my most injured players were the guys that were the most flexy and bendy, the guys that were overly flexible. Mm-hmm. There comes a point where flexibility works against you. There's absolutely no reason in the world from an athletic performance point of view that you need to do splits, forward or back bending splits, or the excessive back bending postures. It's just going to get you in trouble. So in the hierarchy of athletic performance, probably the least important factor is flexibility. It's not that important. And there's no correlation between injury prevention and a high level of flexibility. Certainly, you don't want to be tight, mm-hmm. and you don't want to be immobile. But there is such a thing as being hypermobile and hyperflexible. And that actually works against you in sports performance and martial art. So, once again, extremism. Usually what you'll find in most gyms or health clubs, all the women are in the Pilates or the yoga room, right? And they're already overly flexible, but they're very weak. Mm-hmm. They have so they can't even do a single chin up or pull up. They can't hang from a bar and pull their head or chin over the bar. And then all the guys are out there in the weight room, heaving the dumbbells and the barbells around. what it should be the reverse. The guys should be in the yoga room, working a little bit in the mobility and flexibility because they've gotten themselves overly stiff and tight. And the girls should be developing some form of strength in the weight room. And of course, the best of all possible worlds is if you were doing both the strength and the mobility flexibility work.
So if flexibility is the least important of physical attributes to athleticism.
I'm not saying it's not important, it's the least important.
Okay, least important. So what are the important ones?
Strength for sure.
Number one?
You have two athletes, same exact skill sets, same exact mobility, flexibility. The stronger one is always going to win.
Okay.
Stronger, better conditioned guy will always win in everything. Save tiddlywinks or maybe marbles or something.
Right.
But yeah, strength gives you a huge edge, a huge advantage. So you want to be as strong as you absolutely can without necessarily sacrificing sports performance for strength. In other words, you don't want to become a strength specialist and start working out like a competitive weightlifter. That will work against you. You want to be spending the majority of your time perfecting your sport. So your listeners out there, you're down in Florida. I imagine a lot play recreational basketball. Maybe some of the younger people still play some recreational soccer or tennis or golf or some of those type of sports. You want to be, or maybe mountain biking or running. Mm-hmm. You want to spend the majority of your time perfecting the skills of your sport. So you want to spend your time running and practicing your runs or your swims, your triathlons, or your tennis, and perfecting those skills. And then you want to spend time each week, a minimum of twice a week, in the weight room doing general exercises, making your body as strong as possible without training like a weightlifter. General exercises performed in a slow, controlled, effective manner. And the difference between one set of exercise versus 5 is almost nil. There's a slight advantage to doing more sets, but it's so infinitesimally small, it's almost not statistically significant. So you can basically get a great strength workout in about 20 to 25 minutes. And then don't worry about it for 3 days and go back in and do it again. And then spend the time doing the recreational pursuits that you love. So you don't have to become a gym rat. It doesn't take a lot of time to get strong. And within about 5 years, it doesn't matter what you do, whether it's machine training, whether it's barbell, dumbbells, it doesn't matter. You're gonna be about as strong as you're ever going to be, and you're gonna be about as muscular as you're ever going to be. The only time I see people make rapid progress after lifting for years is because they were grossly overtraining. One of the least understood factors in training is what we call recovery ability, your ability to recover from exercise. You have a finite amount of recovery. Your body only has a certain amount of resources to direct towards building size and strength. And most people don't have, as we said before, a lot of genetic potential that way anyway. But if you're really doing an excessive amount of exercise plus playing sports, you're not going to have enough resources in your body to build. You're going to be just basically playing catch up, trying to replace the energy and the resources that you used up. So you want to give yourself time for recovery. And that's one thing that a lot of young people in particular don't want to do. They have it mixed up. The magic doesn't happen in the gym or the weight room. The magic happens when you're at home, sleeping in bed. That's when the body has a chance to rebuild and adapt and repair itself from the work. But the exercise itself is merely a stimulus. As a matter of fact, the immediate effect of exercise is pretty negative. Right? You go out to the gym and you're tired and you're weaker and you're tired, you're starving, you're hungry, you're hormonally, you're pretty messed up. That means you've signaled, your body's basically looking at the workout as a threat to its own survival. You've basically tapped into the survival mechanism. So your body's saying, hey, wait a second, man. Demands were placed on me that I was unable to meet. I was worked really hard. Well, I better adapt and get stronger so I don't die. That's how at the cellular level, that's how it's perceiving the workout. So you want the workout to be very effortful, very hard, but then you got to give yourself plenty of time for the adaptation response to occur. But if you're chronically going in the weight room or the exercise room or the aerobics room, or if you're going to yoga and you're doing some really strenuous flow type style yoga or Ashtanga yoga every day, you're not making any kind of adaptations. Your body is a chance to rest and recuperate at a higher level. And you don't want to just recuperate back to square one. You want to recuperate at a slightly higher level than you were before. That's all part of that stress adaptation theory. Mm-hmm. But what happens a lot of times, people are just kind of like, treading water. They might get back to square one, like they replace the energy they used up before the workout, but they never make it to that next level of slightly stronger because they're working out too much. So in cases where people have been chronically overtrained for years, I have seen people make sudden increases in muscular size and strength just by giving themselves more rest. I had one guy that was so overtrained, I made him stop lifting weights for almost 2.5 weeks, and the guy gained 3.5 pounds of muscle, lost 1 pound of fat, and gained 1/2 inch in his arms. That's how overtrained this poor guy was. And just by taking off a half a month from the weight room, all of a sudden his body was able to finally adapt. So this idea of beating your brains out in the weight room or having to become a gym rat, I mean, some people have amazing recovery. They seemingly can just beat themselves and still flourish, but they're few and far between. They're the people you read about in the magazines or, you see the YouTube wonders. Mm-hmm. But people got to understand, for every YouTube wonder and every person in the magazines, there's like 10,000 other people that did the same exact thing. That crashed, burned, got sick, got injured, overused injuries and so forth. So
that's excellent. Now
these are things that took me a while to figure out.
Yeah, and thank you for leading the way, because I just kind of follow what you do, apply it to what I do, and it's helped a lot. Now we've talked about exercise, which is a big piece of the puzzle. We've talked about not going extreme. We've talked about make sure you recover, make sure that you strength train. Now, of course, nutrition is a piece of the puzzle too. How big of that? How big is that piece? So if
for fat loss is everything.
Okay.
For fat loss is everything. It's a well-known fact in the diet industry. It is an industry, by the way. It's $1 billion industry, right. As is the supplement industry. It's a well-known fact that you can lose as much weight just dieting with no exercise as you can exercising and dieting together. This has been proven more than once. I think the landmark study was at the University of Pennsylvania in Philly, and they found that there was no real difference whether you exercise and diet or just diet. But the problem is, if you diet without exercise, you lose muscle, valuable muscle. Muscle is very dear. It's very expensive tissue. It's metabolically active. So the key is you want to lose the body fat, but not strip your lean muscle. Now, so diet is the number one. The other thing is, it doesn't really seem to matter what diet you're on, as long as you're some type of calorically restricted diet. So whether you do, let's say, the intermittent fasting, which is very popular, where you fast the first part of the day and then you just eat within the time window, mm-hmm. or whether you eat 3 meals a day or whatever, it just doesn't seem to really matter. And, whether you follow the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet or the paleo diet or whatever, the ketogenic diet, or the macrobiotic diet, it doesn't matter. Because all diets work the same. It's caloric restriction. So for people that are overweight, I would recommend highly that they figure out what they're eating.
Right.
It's kind of hard to lose weight if you don't know how many calories you're taking in and how many calories you're burning. That's one way to go.
Right.
And another way to go is you just start eating the predominant amount of your food as fruits and vegetables. It's damn near impossible to overeat fruits and vegetables. If you make that the base of your diet, good raw, fresh produce, I've had some people have tremendous success dropping body fat just by getting rid of all the over-processed stuff and just predominantly growing fruits and vegetables as the base of the diet. And eating lean meats and or protein foods. Or if they're vegetarian, they can substitute vegetarian protein food along with that. And then keeping the starches to a minimum. Not that carbohydrates make you fat. It's just that starches are so delicious. When I'm talking about breads and cereal grains and rice and potatoes and yams. They're so delicious. It's very easy to overeat. So you can also do it that way. You can just be very careful about the way you combine your foods. But ultimately, you have to create some type of deficit. And you got to do it in such a way that you're not miserable and you're not chronically hungry all the time.
Excellent.
And if you want to age well, you can't go wrong making the base of your diet predominantly good fresh raw produce, good fresh fruits and vegetables and so forth. And then everything else is just kind of supplementary to that. I myself eat pretty light. I like the time window type diets. I'll usually wake up in the morning and have either matcha green tea, maybe a little raw honey mixed in there. Give me just a little bit of sugar, a little carb, because I like to go out and walk or do breathing exercises, sometimes run outside. And then I like to train. And I like to come back, and then I like to have my first meal of the day. And that's usually around 11, 12 o'clock. And that meal will be a good protein meal. Today, for example, I had chicken, these wonderful ground-up chicken patties that Teresa bought here in Moscow, and this wonderful big leafy green raw vegetable salad with all sorts of nice chopped up vegetables in there, tomatoes and grated beets and cucumbers and some bell pepper and stuff like that. And then also some spinach. It was cream spinach, as a matter of fact. It was delicious. And now that was about 11, almost noon. What is it, almost 5? In about another hour, I usually like to go 5-6 hours between meals. I'm going to have a big bowl of berries with fresh raw figs. And I'm looking at this Russian yogurt. You always hear about Greek yogurt. Well, there's a little food co-op. The Russians are really into it. They have a lot of people really into health and nutrition. There was this little co-op around the corner where they make their own yogurt. And this guy gave me some honey today. This guy I was training with, he brought me honey from his farm, like fresh raw honey right off the honeycomb. So I mixed that in there with that yogurt. So I'll eat my fruit and I'll have my yogurt and my honey. That's a meal for Steve Maxwell. That's a day.
So two meals, high protein meal and then
meal. Yeah, well, this one still has some protein, but there's some good natural carbohydrates in the form of honey and fruit. And I like to eat the fruit first because it digests really quick, and I don't want to slow it down by having the yogurt first because this yogurt is fatty. It's not full fat, but it's whole milk yogurt. Okay. I'll have that second. I'll let that fruit go through me for about 10 minutes or so. I'll wait so it gets a good head start digestive-wise so it doesn't ferment in there. But, maybe tomorrow I won't have any meat at all. One of my favorite is I like avocado toast. I like whole grain bread really toasted because it forces you to really chew because digestion starts in the mouth and most people bolt their carbohydrates. You got to chew those carbohydrates to liquid. So I'll have some toast, really toasty, like hard, with avocado spread on it. That would be my protein for the day. So I don't go high protein every day. I go vegetarian at least a couple of days a week, or I'll have fish.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
I almost never eat beef anymore. I will have buffalo now and again, or venison or deer. I'm not a vegetarian. My girlfriend is. She's she's actually a vegan for the most part. Occasionally she'll have a little dairy, but it doesn't matter. I mean, ultimately, it's your mindfulness about what you're eating, and you got to eat really light. The longest lived people in the world are the people that are systematically under eating really light. People say, well, yeah, but doesn't that slow your metabolism down? Yes, I want my metabolism to be slow. The animal with the fastest metabolism is a mouse. They only live for about 2 years. And the animal with the slowest metabolism is the Galapagos tortoise, and they live for like a couple hundred years. So, I don't want to be burning like a mouse.
Right.
So, a slow metabolism, you just don't eat so much. That's all.
Good. So we've got a little bit on exercise, a little bit on nutrition. If we can go back to the very beginning, well, what are you into now as far as exercise? You said you're not really into kettlebells anymore.
No, I was finding I was really racking my shoulders up. That was a really painful thing to admit. Mm-hmm. Painful physically, but painful psychically, because I really liked kettlebells. I thought they were pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I fell into it like everybody else, I fell in for that whole Russian stick. But, this is like my 8th visit to Russia, and I've trained with Russian military guys, former special ops guys. The kettlebell isn't that big of a deal over here, believe it or not. I was really surprised. That we were kind of sold a little marketing thing by Dragon Door back in the day, all that shtick about, the kettlebell being this big, important training tool. Most of the modern athletes don't use them at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, or they'll use them just for 1 or 2 exercises, like a supplement. Most of the guys are into bodyweight or barbell training. But for me, myself personally, since I'm on the road, I started doing a lot of isometrics. I really like isometric training. Yoga actually is a form of isometric. Mm-hmm. Think about holding your handstand, mm-hmm. or holding the frog pose. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what you call it, where you hold that. I think it's called the crane pose.
It can be anything. Any of
them. Well, it's basically a hand balancing pose. Yeah.
If you're doing it right.
Yeah, where your knees are on your triceps and your arms are straight and your hold. That's hard, man. That's an isometric. Right. Just hold downward facing dog for 3 minutes sometime. Right. And tell me how your shoulders and triceps feel.
Exactly.
Or you do those dive through push-ups off mm-hmm. your toes. Some people call them Hindu push-ups, but they're used in yoga too. Mm-hmm. And try a few of those, nice and slow with high tension, and tell me if you don't get the workout of your life for your upper body. But a lot of the yoga poses are isometric. Mm-hmm. And I found the isometric training is a very overlooked form of training. Most people think about, lifting stuff, but they never think about holding things. And a lot of sports put a premium on holding strength. Think rock climbing. Mm-hmm. Think wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, mixed martial arts. A lot of holding, even gymnasts, they do a lot of holds, like on the rings or the parallel bars or thing, mixed with some dynamic stuff. So I mixed bodyweight training in with the isometrics, and man, my joints feel great. Tell you, Brian, my body hasn't felt so good in a long time. I just don't beat myself up with trying to sling heavy weights around anymore. I just found it's unnecessary, and it was working against. I want to age well. I have like my own little health system I've created based on yoga and Qigong and the Russian Slavic health system. And I kind of mixed it together. And some things I learned from the Gracies in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some of their exercises. And I kind of made my own little system, the Maxwell health system. And I may not add 1 year to the length of my life, but I want those years that I do have on this earth to be good quality years. So it's not even the length of one's life, It's the quality of those years that really count.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not want to end up like some of my elderly relatives, all hunched over and terrible pain, and basically spending 20 years dying very slow, uncomfortable, painful death. My poor mother is all hunched over, can barely move. I don't believe, Brian, she could get down on the floor and get back up.
Mm-hmm.
I do not believe she could. And, she's only in her early 80s, mid 80s. So, yeah, she got to be in her mid 80s now. And part of it is she just let herself go. And she didn't take as good care of herself as she could have. So I want to avoid that. And I am going to avoid that by keeping good mental outlook and keeping positive thinking and backing it up with right action directed by my higher mind to do the right type of exercise and eat the right thing. So maybe I won't live 1 year longer than if I wouldn't have done these things, but the quality is going to be quite good. I'm going to still be able to squat and get down, up and down off the floor. One of my things, by the way, is ground engagement. One of the things I noticed in a lot of my seminars on fitness, people have difficulty getting up and down off the floor.
Yeah.
They use a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
So I practice a lot of falling. It's part of my martial arts training anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I practice falling and also effortlessly getting up and getting down on the floor. If you want a great workout, you and your listeners out there, try this. Get up and down off the floor 50 times. See if you can do it in 10 minutes. Wow, what a workout. You can do it as a finisher. Your next workout, whatever that's going to be. When's your next workout, Brian?
Should be today.
Okay, what are you going to do today?
Well, today was going to be, believe it or not, it was going to be kettlebells, but I'm kind of rethinking that right now.
Well,
kettlebells.
Maybe avoid the snatches, Yeah.
Yeah.
If you like kettlebells, do your swings.
Yeah.
Maybe do some pull-ups or chin-ups.
Yeah.
Maybe some push-ups or dips, right? Renegade rows, maybe a few get-ups, right? And then at the very end, set a clock and lay down and get up off the floor with control, not throwing yourself down 50 times. Okay. And try to get up all these different ways. Sometimes get up off from your stomach, sometimes get up from your back. And if it's too easy, just do one hand. If that's still too easy, fold your arms across your chest and get up and down off the floor 50 times with no arms at all. That'd be for your younger people. For your older people, one hand, and maybe people that are somewhat immobile, two hands.
Right. Try
it and time yourself. And tell me if it's not one of the best workouts of your life. But you got to do it control. You just can't throw yourself down, can't bang your knees. You got to get down and up with control. And see if you can do it effortlessly, although it won't be. It'll be effortful. You'll be breathing like crazy.
Yeah.
It's a life skill. People can't get up and down off the floor because they don't get up and down off the floor. Just like most people in America cannot squat. Oh, my knees, my knees. The squat isn't a knee exercise. The squat is a hip exercise. So if you feel squats in your knees, you're not using your glutes and you're not using your hips. So squat is one of the 10 archetypal human postures, and people that can't squat are rare. They're prematurely aged. Or if you're already old and you can't squat, well, yeah, you are old. But man, when I go to Asia or some places in the Middle East, or let's say the Balkan countries, people squat like effortlessly. They could sit there and have a conversation. They take a cigarette break and squat. Like it's nothing for them. You see girls sitting and texting their friend while on a break. People will be waiting for a bus, having conversation. Only in Western countries where people sit in chairs do have people lost the ability to do a very simple thing like a full flat foot squat effortlessly.
Yeah, that's something. And that's just from sitting, because we're in this 90-degree angle at the hip, 90-degree angle at the knee, 90-degree angle at the ankles all the time.
That's right.
Correct? Yeah. Awesome.
So squat, just regaining the squat would do a tremendous amount of benefit for one's health and one's hip mobility. And, people can relearn how to use their glutes. A lot of people, they suffer from what's called gluteal amnesia. They forget how to use their buttock muscles, because your butt is what propels you upstairs, breaks your speed going downhill or downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically you're climbing, and it's the muscle that propels you horizontally. You're walking, you're running, and most people are feeling everything in their knees. The leading surgery now in the joint replacement surgery in the U.S. is knee replacement. It used to be hip replacement, now it's knee. Everyone's using their knees when they should be using their butt.
Right.
They're using their front thighs. They become front thigh dominant. And a lot of the world, it's still hip replacement surgery. Places like Australia, the UK, the EU, people are damaging their joints. By not moving, you actually create rust. You got to get up and get the rust off, and you got to move that body, and you got to learn to use the butt. So get people doing that yoga bridge, the shoulder bridge.
Oh, for sure.
And then go to the point where they can do it one leg. Fantastic glute activation drill.
Well, that's great validation, because that's how we teach it, and I got it from you. So, from some of your kettlebell videos, like explaining how to do the hip extension, and so you get the hip extension through bridging, and then you just take it to the next level, single-legged hip extensions. But we hold for time, so it becomes isometric versus dynamic.
That's right. So once again, it doesn't matter what system of training you use. Mm-hmm. Within about 5 to 6 years, you're going to meet whatever genetic potential you have. At that point, then you just got to be grateful and happy. And then from there, it's about a matter of maintaining. Your early years is like saving money in the bank. You build as much strength and resiliency and as much inner life force as you can. And then you try to hold on to that as you age to sustain you for the rest of your life. And of course, it goes down. And no matter what you do, you get weaker and slower, and your body begins to betray you. And you'll get some aches and pains and so forth. Your body does wear out somewhat. Although it's remarkable, the body is one of those machines that seems to improve from use. But you can wear it out if you're not careful. You want to watch the wear and tear in your joint. That's why I'm not a real big fan of swinging heavy weights up over your head. Right. Just don't think it's good. Now, for people that can press a weight over their head, that's fine. That's one of the things. My right shoulder, I damaged it. You see, it's one thing to get hurt playing sport. Like in a game like jiu-jitsu or martial arts, mm-hmm. you expect to get hurt, right? It's part of the game. You don't go in and play rough boy sports like rugby or football or even things like soccer and basketball without expecting to have some type of injury. Mm-hmm. But with your supplementary strength training, you should never get hurt. Unless your strength training is your sport. If you're in some form of competitive weightlifting, whether it be kettlebell sport, where you're doing the aerobic sport for the higher reps as a contest, or you're making your exercise some type of competition like CrossFit, okay, you expect to get hurt. Because as soon as you put competition in anything, the safety goes right out the window. Right? And you're going to get hurt. Running, for example. I love to run nice and slow. I mean, I'm running like 9.5, 10-minute miles. I don't care how fast mm-hmm. I go. I'm just doing it for a good cardio response. However, if I decided I wanted to run the local 10K, let's say, in a couple months, I started really pouring it on and working my speed and all that. There's a good chance I would probably, get some type of little overuse injury as soon as you start putting those type of competitive parameters on it. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not saying people shouldn't be competitive. Just go in there with open eyes and realize that as soon as you put competition in anything, a lot of the health benefits start going out the window. And your strength training should make those competitive sports or even just fun recreational sports safer by strengthening your connective tissue, strengthening your joints, improving your mobility and your flexibility, and making all those things better. And if you're getting hurt in your supplementary strength training, well, you better take a hard look at what you're doing. You might want to change your philosophy. If you're blowing your shoulder out doing front levers, you got to ask yourself, what am I doing front body weight levers for, or front planches, or inlocates or dislocates in the rings? You got to ask yourself, what am I doing it for? What am I getting out of it? Is it improving my quality of life? Is it improving my recreational sport? Unless that is your recreational sport.
Got you. Man, Steve, we're coming up to the end of this thing.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while. Let's see, how long have we been talking? I lost track.
We can go on and on and on. But maybe we'll reschedule. We'll set up another one in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
But in the meantime, where can people find you? What events are coming up? What would you like people to know, and how can they find you?
Well, the best thing to do would be go to my events page on my website. Okay. My website is SteveMaxwellSC.com. MaxwellSC.com. I said Steve Maxwell. I meant MaxwellSC.com.
Okay.
The S is for strength. The C is for conditioning. So MaxwellSC.com. Mm-hmm. And if people look, they'll see that I have a schedule of places I go. And I don't know whether your listeners know, I am a nomad. I'm a digital nomad. I have no home, no house, no apartment, no base camp, no base of operations. Basically, my home right now is in this apartment here in beautiful Moscow, Russia. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Tenerife in the Canary Islands. And then after that, I'll be back in Serbia. Or Bosnia, I think. I'm going to be in Bosnia. So I'm just traveling the world all the time. I have one 30-liter bag, a Tom Bin Aeronaut 30. All my life's possessions are in that, and this little man purse I carry. It's also Tom Bin Co-Pilot. Great little bags, by the way. And that's it. I have 2 pair of pants to my name, 4 T-shirts, a jacket, and a hoodie. And travel 2 little pairs of sneaks, and that's it.
That's awesome.
I don't have much. 3 pair of underpants. I think I counted 5 socks this one. I just wash things out a lot in the sinks. And, all my stuff is high-tech, stretched nylon, so it's all quick dry, stain-resistant, water-resistant. And I can wash stuff up in hotel sinks or a bathtub somewhere. And I just travel the world pretty much. And I don't ever dress up, so I don't need dressy clothes. If some place requires a jacket or tie, I just don't want to go there. And my workout clothes are the work clothes I wear every day, so I don't have like separate training clothes. My normal clothes are my training clothes. And that's how I live my life. And as long as I have internet, I'm good to go. So you never know when I'm going to show up in your backyard there, Brian.
Yeah. Anytime you're in the States, anytime you're in Central Florida, you are welcome at Winter Garden Yoga. We're definitely open to that. People are still talking about when you came and visited a few years ago. They're asking, when's Steve coming back? I said, I don't even know when Steve's going to be on this part of the world. So
I have a bunch of tricks, man. I am going to be in Savannah, Georgia coming up sometime late November, I think.
Awesome.
And I'll be back in my old stomping grounds near Philly doing a jiu-jitsu seminar. And it looks like I'm going to have, looks like I'm going to have a bunch of stuff coming up in the States here. I know I have something in Phoenix, Arizona coming up, and another gig in LA, San Diego. So I will be back. San Francisco too. But then I'll be back in Europe again.
Okay. Well, you have an open invitation anytime, Winter Garden Yoga. We'd love to have you.
Appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much. And check out MaxwellSC.com. Thanks again.
All right. Great talking to you,
you.
and best of luck, and stay in touch.
Awesome. Will do.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye-bye
Steve.
now.
Take care.